Christina Hart.
Hi, this is Christina Hardy. I am talking today about transiting Uranus conjunct the natal moon. Now we have a number of participants, and I suspect you are either experiencing transiting Uranus conjunct your moon, or you're about to, or you have. And so today I'm going to describe the two archetypes, the Uranus moon archetypes, and then give myself as an example when I was experiencing Uranus conjunct my moon. And we have, gratefully, two volunteers who are going to be joining us. Well, we have two volunteers, and one of the volunteers will be joining us. The other volunteer, unfortunately, had to back off tonight because she is not feeling well. And as you will see, but I will be showing her chart. And as you will see, I don't know if this is why, but not only did she have Uranus-Neptune conjunct her moon, which I'll be talking about, but she currently has Pluto conjunct her moon. So it's got to be a pretty intense time right now. But I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So, and I'll take questions. I'll be talking about the archetypes, and then I'll launch into my experience with Uranus transiting Uranus conjunct my moon, and I'll take questions, and then we'll launch into the volunteers. So, okay, just to begin, just to kind of ground ourselves in the archetypes. Some of you may be very familiar with this. In fact, I have a couple of students from my class, Intro to Evolutionary Astrology class here, so you'll be very familiar with this. But for those of you who are not, it's really important to understand the archetypes and then how we put those two archetypes together. So Uranus rules the 11th house, and it rules Aquarius. Here's the symbol for Uranus, and here's the symbol for Aquarius. It is the air element, and which rules the mental body. The air elements rule the mental body. It is a fixed modality, which definitely qualifies the air element. The archetypes would be the genius and unconventional, the awakener, and the exile are some common archetypes. Now, there are a million different ways to express the archetypal energy of Uranus, Aquarius, in the 11th house. For those of you who are really wired strongly for it. But these are sort of some common archetypes for that energy. Uranus rules the temperament of individuation, okay? In evolutionary astrology, it rules the whole individuation process, regardless of whether you are in that state of consciousness. You could be in the spiritual state of consciousness. You could be in the consensus state of consciousness. Uranus rules individuation from one stage to the next. And the reason is Uranus really works very closely with Saturn. It works to shatter the Saturnian conditioning that keeps one limited. When one is ready to evolve, when one is ready to grow, it literally just shatters. And you'll be hearing some examples of this in this presentation here. Those conditioning patterns, those limitations that keep us constrained. And when the soul is ready to evolve, Uranus can come in as a transit and just shatter it open. And its purpose is for the sake of freedom, which is the process of individuation. It shatters cherished limitations. One must, as a Uranian individual, or when one is experiencing Uranus conjuncting any of the planets, but as we're talking here about the moon, it really is, one must express one's unique identity, okay? As an air element, it rules thoughts, the intellect, it rules knowledge. It also rules objectivity and detachment. Okay, so it's, as some of you may know, Uranus, Aquarius in the 11th house is opposite the Sun, Leo, 5th house, which is very subjectively oriented, the solar identity of who one is as an individual. And the opposite house with Aquarius and Uranus in 11th house is very much around gaining objectivity from one's subjective personal reality. Okay, it helps to expand consciousness. It helps to expand awareness, especially on the mental body, being the ruler of the mental body, but in such a way as one is detached. Okay, it can show brilliant intellectuality because it's a high frequency mental archetype. It also can show openness and availability to change. And that's kind of the part of Uranus and Aquarius in the 11th house, where one is growing, one is individuating, one needs to be open for change and looking for the inspiration into what is the new, especially as the 11th house in Aquarius, it's what is one's vision? What does what is one's hopes? What are one's wishes? Okay, so so Uranus and Aquarius 11th house is very much around openness to change. However, being a fixed modality, there is the contradiction within it because it can also be very stuck mentally. It can be very, what's the word, stubborn mentally. So, but predominantly the intent is to evolve and to shatter any mental limitations. It rules the individual unconscious. So as the individual unconscious emerges into conscious awareness through the Saturnian conscious awareness, one suddenly becomes aware, it can bring in past life memories. It can also bring the future. So as far Uranus ruling sort of time along time continuums, it includes the past as well as the future. And the way that it usually emerges is kind of like a flash in consciousness, a flash of awareness, like the big aha moment when suddenly you see the whole of it. And that's why I really like the lightning bolt as an example of Uranus, because that is exactly what it's like. It's like it can feel very dark and foreboding, and one can be in this darkness. And then the lightning bolt comes in, and for a flash, you see the whole gestalt and you see the whole landscape very quickly. And that's the way it tends to come. It comes in very quickly, you get it, and it moves on. So that's sort of the whole vision in a flash. It can come forward that way. It rules idealism. And it also rules the tribe, one's community, and like-minded people. Okay, so a key phrase would be my need to be innovative, original, and an agent of change. Distortions would be trauma, alienation, fragmentation. Okay, so as it rules the mental body, when one has been traumatized, when the part of the mental body can fragment, and usually as an astrologer, if there's Uranus, conjuncting or in some large aspect like a square or opposition to a planet, sometimes that means fragmentation, in particular when it's related to the nodal axis or related to Pluto. So it's something to really be aware of. And it's basically mental fragmentation that's kind of separated at some point in our evolutionary trajectory, and it's been allowed to develop on its own. And the purpose of this lifetime is to bring it in and to integrate that fragmented aspect of oneself. Now, part of the reason why sort of genius can be associated with Aquarian, Uranian types is because that fragment can actually be allowed to develop on its own and as separate from the rest of the body. So as you know, a number of geniuses, of course not all, but one of the common theme of a genius is that they are mentally brilliant, way ahead of the rest of the crowd, but emotionally very immature. And that would be a sign of lack of integration of the mental with the emotional physical body. So that's Uranus, and moving on to the next slide here. Transiting Uranus strikes through in order to liberate that which has been suppressed into the personal unconscious, okay? So as you know, Uranus is the planet after Saturn. So Saturnian consciousness is the consciousness of our consensus. And it's also our conditioning, whether it's the conditioning of well, certainly our family upbringing, but it's the belief systems that we were raised into, whether it was one's religion or lack of religion. It could have been atheism that one was raised into, but basically the conditioning of the environment that we absorbed as we were developing as a child. So Uranus can come in as the planet after Saturn and just really crack open the conditioning, and it does so in a very, and it tends to do so in a very sudden, shocking kind of way. But remember, the purpose of Uranus is to liberate consciousness in order to expand consciousness. Okay, I've got a quote here from Jeffrey Green about, yeah, this is from his book, Uranus, Freedom from the Known. Uranus is always trying to knock on Saturn's door in such a way to shatter all conditioning patterns, all those known, familiar, and thus secure structural definitions of inner and outer reality. So as Saturn contracts, Uranus liberates, okay? Uranus refuses to accept the limitations imposed by Saturn. Yeah. So moving on to the moon archetype, and then I'll be ready for some questions before I actually, I guess before I launch into my chart. So the moon being the ruler of the fourth house, the ruler of Cancer. There are the symbols here for the moon and for Cancer. It is the water element which rules the emotional body. Okay, so, and the archetype would be the mother, the nurturer, that which gives birth to form. Okay, it's deeply personal. Okay, wherever the moon is, or whatever is in the fourth house, or whatever is in Cancer, is very deeply emotionally personal and subjective. Okay, very different from the Uranian archetype. It changes over time. It is inwardly very sensitive, outwardly very protective of one's own sensitivity. And as you know, the crab is the symbol for Cancer. And that is, the crab is a great metaphor for it, because the crab has the outer shell, a hard shell, to protect its deep, sensitive innards. It rules the home and family, the closest planetary archetype to the Earth, as of course you know that the moon is the satellite around the Earth. And the fourth house is at the base of the chart. It is, the moon and Cancer types tend to be understanding and caring. And it rules birth through infancy to early development. So as part of the developmental cycle, it's from birth through infancy to early development. And it is very subjective. Subjective reactions to one's emotional experiences. The cardinal modality can make it very reactive, emotionally reactive when triggered, but calming, soothing, and healing when not triggered. Okay, so this is the moon, the archetype of the moon. Distortions would be emotionally insecure, and so hides behind its shell like the crab, or mothers everyone, and that is obviously a sign of insecurity, trying to get their needs met through other people. A distorted aspect of the archetype of Cancer would be overbearing, emotionally defensive, overreactive, overly subjective, and also passive aggressive. Think of the crab. They never walk in a straight line, right? They can just, you know, they can go left, they can go right, they can go around you, but they find ways of getting their needs met. Okay, the moon, the fourth house, the emotional body, getting your emotional needs met in a very non-direct kind of way. Okay, they can also undermine you, especially if there's Mars related or Aries connected to the Cancer, to the water. Okay, any questions about Uranus or the moon so far before I go to the next slide? Remember, you'll need to unmute yourself, and I can't see everybody all at once, so if you want to say something. Are you guys good? Okay, so moving along, the moon also, the birth from the great mother to the individual human, she who has given birth to space-time itself and all that has been created and made manifest in form. It is meant to be embodied and experienced, and that is through the archetype of the moon, okay? 4th house, and they Cancer. So there is a direct correlation between the Great Mother and one's own personal experience of giving birth. Now, it doesn't need to be giving birth to children. It could be giving birth to many different things, but it is the act of giving birth. And as you know, the moon changes form through time, from the new moon to the first quarter moon to the full moon to the last quarter moon. It changes, it continuously changes form. And that is part of the lunar archetype, is changing form over time. Now, Uranus conjunct the moon, remember, taking that high voltage energy and connecting it, contacting with the deep emotional waters of the subjective personal body. Okay, it's very intense, bringing that high voltage energy into something as deeply personal as one's own mothering. Now, the common theme out of the three of us in this is the sudden death of the mother. Now, in my case, it was the Divine Mother, okay, which I'm going to explain. I'll be starting off with mine. For Wendy, who unfortunately will not be able to be with us, but it was for her own personal mother.
Christina,
Christina, yes.
Wendy's just joined the meeting.
Oh, Wendy, thank you. Yes. Hey, Wendy. Glad you're here. So she has seen the slide. So Wendy, I just described the Uranus archetype and the moon archetype. We'll be launching into the charts shortly.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. Hey. So the moon can initiate one onto a path of liberation that births a spiritual awareness on an emotional level. Okay, that's the integration of the Uranus and the moon. Uranus conjunct the moon, being birthed into a new level of consciousness by shattering the old in order to begin the process of shifting into a higher or spiritual level of emotional nourishment. Okay, this will make more sense in a bit. So starting with my own example here, this is, well, first of all, so we're talking about the Uranus transit. Many of you probably know, but Uranus takes about 84 years to go around, to orbit around the sun, which means it takes 84 years to go around a person's chart. Okay, that's very, 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 very slow. Not everybody gets a Uranus conjunct moon, okay, but everybody gets at some point like a square or an opposition to the moon, or sextile or trine, but they may not actually experience Uranus conjunct moon. Of course, it depends how long they live. But most of you probably have at some point in your life, since most of us live beyond 84 years these days, thank God. The transit itself is about 3 to 3.5 years for myself. And what I'm giving is a 5-degree orb. Okay, just evolutionary astrology with conjunctions and the transits tends to give 5 degrees orb, and I like to stick to that. And that's what I'm using here in this presentation. So for me, my Uranus conjunct moon transit was from February 1997 to February 2000, okay? So many of you have heard my story of, and the reason why I'm even saying this is, and I'm not going to repeat it because many of you have heard it, but this falls right towards the end of my graduate work. I had gotten my graduate degree in 1995 and then launched into a doctoral program at the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And I was really at the time, so looking at my chart here, at the time I was going through the Pluto conjunct Saturn, which I'm not going to talk about because that's not what this presentation is about, but I'm bringing it up because that kind of cleared the way before the Uranus conjunct the moon. Here's my moon. As you can see, the moon is conjunct Chiron, okay? And so my experience was launched actually 2 weeks after Uranus exactly conjuncted my moon, okay? So I'm going to, so moon as a representative of, you know, one's early development, one's birth, infancy, early development. I'm going to give you a real brief on what I how I chose to be born in this world. And so my actual birth was, I was born 1 month premature, okay, which is not unusual in itself, but I almost didn't survive. And so I was put into an incubator for somewhere between 10 days and 2 weeks. But what was strange and probably very usual in 1956, which is when I was born, was that the hospital did not allow my mother to touch me during the time that I was in the incubator. Part of it was they believed, of course, for me to survive, to grow, develop, and strengthen the time that I was there. But as you can imagine, for an infant, not being able to be touched for the first 10 days to 2 weeks of their life, it's pretty tough. And I actually saw, of course, I wasn't aware of any of this until I launched my journey, my sacred medicine journeys. And again, I'm going to back up a little bit here. My first journey was April 4th, 1998. It was actually when over my birthday is April 5th. And so for my 42nd birthday, I had been given the opportunity to join an ayahuasca circle in San Francisco. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, even though I should have, because I've been studying Stan Grof and much of the psychedelic research that had been done back in the 60s before LSD and psychedelics became illegal. I'd been studying, and I'd also done holotropic breath work. But my first ayahuasca journey was just mind-crackingly opening. And I'm going to read from especially 2 journeys that I had over the first 6 months. I actually was so incredibly inspired by the sacred medicine work that I did the practice once a month for over a 2-year period. And this was exactly when Uranus was conjuncting my moon. So in one of the journeys, I saw myself in my mother's womb. Okay. And in the womb, I could see from inside the womb, I could see myself sort of experiencing anxiety. You know, it's like I was experiencing anxiety inside of the womb. And I, in typical, and this was at the time Aries, in typical Aries fashion, it was like, I'm out of here. That was my consciousness. I'm out of here. So as I'm going through my mother's birth canal, I'm also simultaneously seeing that outside of the birth canal was just as bad. In fact, it was worse. It was more than anxiety. It was like complete cold alienation. And so I'm coming out and I'm like, shit, this is really alienating. And I could feel the anxiety in the air. Now, it could have been the doctors kind of worried about if I was going to survive or not. But it was also what I really picked up in the journey was the coldness. And sort of the fragmentation of coming out of the womb into this cold area. And when I mean cold, I mean emotionally cold. Whoops, hold on 1 second. I just lost. Can you guys still hear me? Linda, can you still hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Because I don't know what happened to my Bluetooth phone here. So anyway, so I was coming out of the womb and I saw that it was really just as bad out there as I was experiencing in there, and it was just what I was attempting to run from, if you will. It was not getting me anywhere. But anyway, so I'm coming out and suddenly I saw myself floating in the universe, and I could see my umbilical cord connected to the Divine Mother in the universe. And I was so angry at her that she had created such an alienating world. And also, as I would, just so you, the other thing I forgot to say too, as I was coming out of the birth canal, I also tuned to my mother. And as I was coming into this very cold environment, I could feel my mother's anguish. And I knew instantly that it was not my mother's fault. I mean, that was the actual literal phrase that came through my head was, this is not my mother's fault. And I could feel the anguish, and that she was caught up also in this very pathological environment. And so then I shifted my anger, rather than at her, towards the Great Mother, and I saw my umbilical cord connected to her. And keep in mind, when you're in sacred medicine, for those of you who've done sacred medicine journeys, a lot of this, all of it is happening simultaneously. And I just saw my anger just slash the umbilical cord. And I lashed out at the Great Mother in spite. And that was the phrase that came through my mind at the time, was I was cutting my connection with her in spite because of what she had created. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So, and this is just a preamble to the actual journey that I experienced. So this was one flash that I got to experience. And then about 6 months after the exact Uranus conjunction, of course, Uranus was still very much conjunct my moon. I had the experience of giving birth to the new humanity. And this is what I wrote. I was initiated into motherhood last night. I fully embodied this honor by giving birth. My womb expanded to the size of the beautiful room that we, the 12 journeying and 2 facilitators, were in. It was beautiful high ceilings with tall windows opening to the sky. It was expansive, but contained and safe. I was initiated into motherhood in that room, in that sacred space. My personal womb expanded and contracted, much internal pain. Eventually, my whole body cracked open down the center. My physical body became the birth canal. Intense energy forced its way through my body. Intense red color, full of power that was beyond and contained in my body. My skull cracked open to let the energy flow through. My body became the Earth's body. I became Gaia, giving birth to the new. I saw how the water, when it breaks before giving birth, is the universe's way of blessing and cleansing the fetus before it begins the birthing process to enter into the world. Blue, crystal clear, nourishing, cleansing water. The spiritual level of intelligence in the body is profound. My bladder was the ocean waters. My bladder also contained the poisons in the waters and the pollution of the planet. I felt the poisons, dark, slimy, nauseating. I saw the importance of drinking lots of water to flush the poisons of the planet. It felt like my way to help cleanse not only myself, but the planet as well. My physical body was the rocks. I felt my body as the layers and layers and layers of the Earth's rocks, infinite in time and space. The rocks hold the container that gives birth to the new. The layers and layers of rock going back in time are like a massive spine for the birthing to happen. My spiritual birth began in my womb and moved up my spinal column to emerge through my head. When this happened, my spine was the container for the new to emerge. As the new emerged, the vertebrae became like dried snake skin that peeled away as the energy rose. The energy had tremendous power and showed itself in the form of a snake. When the energy crested, my torso and head expanded to take on the shape of a cobra's head. I could even feel the hood coming over my head. As I became the cobra, I saw how this was only a part of the process and to not get stuck at that level. The snake helps with the transformation. It is the power of transformation, the Kundalini energy. The important lesson that I was being shown is to not get stuck by becoming enamored with any part of the process. I needed to let the unfolding continue. What eventually emerged was a beautiful, clear, multifaceted diamond. It reflected rainbow colors. The crystal was so pure and its energy so high that it could not be tainted by earthly desires and needs. The crystal emerged at the interface between the finite and the infinite. The infinite was truly eternal and brilliant and blue in color. The focus was on the infinite and the space that the infinite gives for complete freedom of expression and expansion. No bounds, no limits. It needs complete freedom to be itself. Its essence was pure freedom, but this freedom easily and joyfully held the dialectic between structure and no boundaries, Saturn and Uranus. Here I saw the significance of the dialectic complementarity between Saturn and Uranus as the planetary rulers of Aquarius. Okay, so keep in mind my moon's in Aquarius. So that is what Uranus was really revealing to me in that particular sacred medicine journey. And this was about 6 months after my first journey. And it was just incredibly enlightening, as you can imagine, most amazing experience. I've not had the opportunity to actually give birth as a mother, but to experience it at this level, it was just phenomenal and very Uranian. So I have one more journey that I would like to describe. It's fairly brief, and it kind of helps to complement this diamond energy, this brilliance and this kind of awakening that occurred at that time. The next journey that I'm going to speak to, I'm going to have this slide up as I'm talking about it. Now, this next journey, well, actually, let me back up for 1 second. So this next journey was actually, as you can see here, Uranus was in Aquarius, April 1998, and Neptune was right behind it in 1998. So Neptune came along later, conjuncting my moon, and as it came within the 5-degree mark of the moon, this was the journey that I had. And again, the reason why I'm describing it, even though this is a Uranus moon discussion, is I think it really nicely complements the Uranus moon experience. And it also is an introduction to our volunteers here too. So I want to bring forth another journey that speaks to the anxiety and the cold, alienating space that we live in. Here I became one with the mother of death, the priestess of the dark. She is the one who stands in great honor of death, for it is within her dark womb that the divine light is born. From the rich, fertile darkness, she is the creator who gives birth to all beauty in form. In her love for life, she is its protectress and nurturer. She embodies all of humanity's suffering, pain, fear, and evil. Humanity's body is her body and my body. Pain, fear, and evil are all manifestations of the divine. These particular constellations of her with a capital H, are the arrow tips that point us to our healing. We must follow the pain and allow it to lead us deeper and deeper into the wound. We must take hold of the tips and pierce right into the depths of our wounds until they become larger than us and we are fully immersed in it. We must fully surrender our being to the pain, drink until saturation, and drown in it. We must be fully willing to die into our wound and become its death. Death is the path to life. Once we learn to surrender to the darkness, we will then know continual, ever rejuvenating life. There was much more to this journey than I can summarize, but the key messages from this journey was, number one, to honor the darkness as one would honor the divine, for the two are one. And to truly honor divinity we must honor the darkness in all of her manifestations, from the most subtle to the deepest black, most concentrated and distilled form of all darkness. It is only then that the divine will become embodied. Now, the journey took me through layers and layers of conditioning within my own body, in particular through the tissue. And many times the journeys were taking me through so much of the inside of my body. And this time it had me moving through tissues and tendons that had become hardened with time, to show me that this conditioning constricted my ability to experience the energy flow of divine love, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And it did so to show me that the primary source for one's ever renewing and rejuvenating nourishment comes from within our personal body, because it is the earth's body. In other words, the world that we have constructed for ourselves takes the ever-renewing and rejuvenating powers of the life force of this earth and cuts it off from the source, which is our bodies. The journey ended with the teaching that all pain leads to its own healing, and if we honor it by following its lead, divinity will become embodied as she truly is. And thus we will birth ourselves into the continual flow of her/our renewing and rejuvenating, nourishing waters. This nourishment comes from within, as our personal body is the earth's body. And that was, and that's the end of that journey, or the written part of the journey. It's just, I can't tell you how much in my journey space, sacred medicine space, how much the teachings were teaching me that the earth's body is our individual bodies. Every single one of us, we hold the earth in us. And the physical body is our spiritual teacher. So despite all the pain it can take us through. So I am going to, before I move into Wendy's chart, actually, let me just leave this here. Any questions? And remember, I can't see you all, so you'll need to unmute yourself and just say something or let me know that you got a question.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you
Hi.
When you say darkness or the dark, is that the same as evil?
Yes, it includes evil. Yeah. Yeah, I've met evil in sacred medicine space and pursued it to find the source of it. And so it's basically divinity not knowing its own divinity, having lost itself in its heart. But it is all divinity.
Hey, Christina, it's Ellen.
Hey,
I was
Ellen.
just thinking about you know, how they say Lucifer was an angel that fell, you know, it just brought that to mind. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what is a quote unquote quick way for us to know, to locate when if we might have this Uranus natal moon conjunction in our lifetime?
I mean, I can, for the rest of you, Ellen lives locally to where I live. So Ellen, I'd be happy to show you. So tell me, what degree is your moon at?
My natal moon?
Yeah, what sign and degree is your natal moon at?
It's 3 degrees in Libra.
Okay, and so you're Libra, Aries. So you had your opposition because Uranus is in Taurus right now. I can't remember the degree, but it's in Taurus. So in Aries is opposite your Libra moon. So you had, what would be interesting would be to see. So it'd be another 40 years maybe before you had a Uranus conjunct moon transit, but you did have the opposition. So it'd be interesting to see what your experience was with the opposition and the timing of that.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Talk about it some more. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm going to move along here. And there we go. So moving to Wendy, Wendy, before you start saying something, I'm going to go through some of the basics here on your chart, and then I'll let you take it over. But to point out, first of all, I want to look at her configuration, her natal. This is her natal chart, and I want to look at her some important things to point out around what is contacting her moon in Capricorn in the 8th house. Okay. So she has what's very interesting is that her moon is at the very tip of the yod. My next slide, actually, why don't I should be, oh, I know, that's right, okay. So the moon is at the very tip of a yod here, okay? What the yod is oftentimes called the finger of God. And what it means, what's significant of the fact that her moon is in Capricorn in the 8th house at the very apex of this yod configuration is, first of all yods, you've got a sextile here. In her case, it's Jupiter and Mercury, okay? So, and especially Jupiter in Gemini conjunct her ascendant. And then Mercury ruling her Gemini in Leo in the 3rd house, which is also very mercurial. So we've got a lot here around information and communication, but they're in a nice sextile to each other. And a sextile is very inspiring. It's stimulating. According to Stephen Forrest, the way he describes it, which I love, it's like sextiles are like when you fall in love. You know, it's like the blush of falling in love, the excitement of the potential of the other that one experiences and embodies. But the thing with the sextile is there's no place for it to go. It's like there isn't any particular like focus point. And that's what the yod, that's what the apex point of the yod does. It's, and I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this. So this is forming an isosceles triangle, if I said this right. And so the moon is in an inconjunct to her Mercury, and it's in an inconjunct to Jupiter, and that's what forms the yod. So the moon forms like a sort of like a PowerPoint or like an extreme intense focus for this Jupiter Mercury sextile. In fact, it's more than a focus, it's like an outlet of that energy. Okay. Now the inconjuncts is kind of like a irritating kind of energy. It's kind of like somebody poking you in the side. You can't really, it's different than a square where it's kind of like, you know, the 90-degree angle where you're looking at, where you're really feeling the challenge and you kind of set yourself up to work through the challenge, kind of like working out. With the yod, it's 150 degrees and it's like somebody's sort of standing behind you, not totally behind you, but a little bit on the side, and they're kind of like poking you. So the inconjuncts kind of make you work. They I guess energize you, but even though it feels uncomfortable, is a bit through discomfort. But the inconjuncts work to help you to integrate the energies, and it's not easy energies to integrate. So she's in a gibbous phase. Her moon's in a gibbous phase, inconjunct to her sun. So she's integrating with the gibbous phase is through humility, her solar Leo fire. She is being asked as a soul to integrate the moon in Capricorn with her sun, okay? And her moon in Capricorn is in full phase, inconjunct to Jupiter, which is, she's also being asked to integrate this, and she's being driven through the inconjuncts to integrate the moon into the Jupiter Mercury, okay, into her ways of thinking and communicating. And maybe we can have her talk more about this, but the fact that she had Uranus and also Neptune, which I'll show you in a minute, but Uranus and Neptune were conjuncting her moon. Let me get my notes here, make sure I'm not confusing. Yeah, in Capricorn, right. So she had a conjunction there. And as I mentioned earlier, then right now she has Pluto too, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So this is Uranus, we're going to talk about Uranus. So then she also has, so not only does she have this yod, so the moon, so the point here is the moon in Capricorn in the 8th house is extremely important for Wendy, for integration, her mind and her philosophy, her understanding of things. And it'll be, the full phase is, I forgot to mention this, the full phase inconjunct is she needs to contribute. She needs to bring it into society. Yeah. And receive feedback from others. And that's her way of expanding and growing and developing her mind and her understanding of things. And then she also has moon square Mars. Okay, so as you can imagine, for those of you who know astrology, that's pretty intense. You know, the emotional body squaring Mars, which is very yang, fire, initiate, making things happen. Moon in Capricorn can be kind of, it's, you know, moon inside of the Saturnian boundaries. It can be the emotional body kind of being very protective of itself and at times having trouble accessing one's emotions. But then Mars squaring it, as I mentioned before, the square, the 90-degree square it gives a lot of oomph to make things happen. So I suspect she doesn't have much trouble, as actually we know, expressing her emotions because of this square. So, so Wendy, you're on board. I did a little bit of let me go ahead and read this, okay? And then I'll turn it over to you.
I was just laughing listening to what you said about Mars.
Yeah. So, and actually I included it in some of it down here. So, so Uranus and Neptune transit. So she, as you can see here, Neptune, Uranus conjuncting her moon in Capricorn. Right after, they were exactly conjunct. I didn't write it down here, but they were exactly conjunct, actually February 1993. They were exactly conjunct then. And this chart is a chart for the moment of her mother's death, or the day of her mother's death in April. So it was soon after the exact Uranus-Neptune conjunction in early 1993. So this basically, her mother's death kind of launched her Uranus-Neptune conjunct. For her, it was a 3.5 year period of time. So the death opened up Wendy's path. Although she had already been on a path of liberation, it was intensified now. Wendy became the executor of the estate after her mother's death and received an inheritance that allowed her to go to massage school. She graduated in 1995. Keep in mind that's before the ending of the Uranus transit. Her family so a bit of her background, her family got into drugs when she was 11 to 12 years old. After her mother died, she began coming to her mother began coming to Wendy, and deep healing happened. The Uranus-Neptune transit taught her forgiveness. She had lots of rage with her mother. She was the one in her family who was able to speak her anger towards her, and that's where you can see the Mars square the moon. She's learned how to move her emotions through dance and movement. She has also been in family origin therapy and done a lot of body work and healing for herself, as well as being a body worker herself. This has allowed the flow between the 10th and 4th houses to occur and for healing to happen. Just one last thing I want to say about this, which I forgot to mention earlier. She's got so the two planets that rule, so Saturn rules Capricorn. So there's Saturn, conjunct Chiron, at the top of her chart. Pluto rules the 8th house. Pluto in the 4th house, home, family, which is kind of another lunar archetype, is opposite her Saturn Chiron conjunction. So she's got this, Pluto here, which is deep emotional wounding, emotional body, 4th house, opposite Saturn. So all the work that she has done around her family through family therapy and so on as she said, has allowed the flow between the 10th and the 4th houses to occur, and incredible healing to occur, because these directly relate to her moon being Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn and the moon as the ruler of the 8th house. Okay, Wendy, take it from here.
Thanks, Christina.
Sure.
I haven't been feeling that good today, so I sound a little off, but that's okay. I'm happy to be here. I mean, I don't really, you can look at the dates and see that was a very long time ago, right? That was, a long time ago.
It was
years ago, right? So
yeah,
almost 30 years ago.
So,
a lot has changed, and Uranus has been an amazing teacher. I've learned, this is just a general thing I've learned over the years with these big outer planet transits, these transpersonal transits, to ask the planet what it wants from me. Because usually when I get to that point, I'm getting a big transit and it's hitting up against something that's been either solidified or concretized or crystallized that is wanting to be released. So, that time was extremely powerful. I was already on my path. I was in recovery. I was, doing a lot of, like you mentioned, family of origin work and healing work. And if you just look at the 4th house planets, you can see that that was a very intense time experience. Without even knowing my chart, that's a pretty loaded house. And then have the 10th house stuff opposing it, you know, adds even more to it. So I spent a lot of time deconditioning from that dynamic, and to have a moon in the 8th house in Capricorn, and then those planets coming along. I mean, Saturn had already been there, right? So
Yeah.
first Saturn was there, and that got me going. A lot of big lessons there. And the Pluto transit to Scorpio, and then Uranus coming. So I was really ready because I was already working with a lot of healers. And well, I was in therapy, so I had everything I needed. It just electrolyzed. It opened up everything even more. And the piece about my mother coming to me is, since I was a girl, I was already connecting. You talked about, like, you know, all the visions and stuff. I was talking to trees and nature and having lots of intuitive experiences. And my grandmother had died several years before, and she came to me, and I had a connection with her. So when my mom actually did die, she started showing up. Like, she'd be in my car or in my bedroom. I'm like, what are you doing here? And I had a lot of anger at her. And I was like, what, you want a relationship now that you're dead? Like, what about when you were here? That would have been really helpful. And so I had to work through my anger and then allow that healing to come. And it took us a long time, but very powerful. So you can heal with someone when they've, you know, already on the other side. And I was deep into receiving body work and healing, and I had huge grief. You know, I mean, look at the Capricorn, just look at the moon in Capricorn, right? A lot of grief that I was processing, and that went on for a long time.
And
Until
then
I
Saturn
really,
in Pisces.
yeah, and until I
Chiron.
really understood that the Divine Mother was my mother. And so I didn't want to bypass all the stuff I came here to work on too, that got expressed in my family and in the ancestral pathway, right? We all choose these lives for a reason, right? And then and we have the opportunity to take what those lessons are and evolve, right? And that's exactly what the whole path has been, is evolving through that. And the gift I really got from even all the challenges, you know, that happened there. So, you know, and when I got led to the Divine Mother, that just really changed everything. And I will just say, being 55 now, and at that time I was like 26, 27, you know, it's a wheel. We cycle, we spiral around the same lessons over and over. And yes, we can evolve through them and have different perspective and have a lot more distance. And like, I don't really get, if I really talk about stuff that happened from the past with my family, I could get irritated, I could get angry, but it's gone. Or it just comes up. I see it with a lot of love rather than getting stuck in it, you know?
Yeah.
So I just mentioned that about going around the wheel because, you know, people think, well, you know, you get over stuff and it's just never comes back. Well, that's just that's not true for me, not for this Pluto and 4th house person. So, you know, with all those planets in my 8th house right now, with all that Capricorn, I mean, I'm doing pretty good, but it's also like very similar to the last time Saturn and all those came around in my 8th house, you know? So it's not unfamiliar. It's like, okay. Anyway, I won't go into the details of it, but thank you so much, Christina. And if you have any questions or anybody, feel free.
Yeah, Wendy, I just want to say thank you so much. It is interesting that you have your moon before Saturn. So you go through Saturn conjunct your moon before you go through your Saturn return. It's, boy, what the lessons there with Saturn, of course, conjunct Chiron and Pisces, that the healing that is occurring, I can imagine, is deep, 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 but not only for you, but for the collective. And that is the part of the teaching, is that it's not
Yeah.
just about us, right? It's
Right.
your personal body is the Gaian body. It's the collective body, and the spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So the work that you're doing is helping the larger collective. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I will just say, you know, I got into Aaron Sullivan's books early on, and when I read about Saturn, and I
Saturn,
also
yeah.
had studied mythology and Joseph Campbell and all of that before I found astrology. You know, Saturn just crossing the threshold of the seventh house, the descendant, and at that point, that's when everything started to really change. After it was like midway in my seventh house, that's when I like was at my knees and getting help, and then everything, you know, then it going through that quadrant, it is a very interesting time.
Yeah, yeah. One quick question: your yod, the fact the you know, the moon in Capricorn at the apex of the yod between Jupiter and Mercury. How are you funneling the Jupiter Mercury energy through your moon?
Well, I would say that really the signature of the chart asks for writing, right? It's about writing and expressing my emotional body through my purpose, through my Leo light, through my ability to be that inner child, authentic, radiating authentic self. And there's lots of, you know, so I have some books I'm working on. They still have not come out, but that's really what it's about. It's about expressing. And I would say the 12th house Gemini is about, I mean, I used to talk about feeling the collective, right? And what's happening in the collective and being a voice. And, you know, I could be channeling, I could be doing, you know, a lot of different pieces with that, but that's not really where I'm at right now. And that's okay. I'm not too pressured about it. There is the Capricorn piece that's asked, you know, I'm building structures to continue to help me move forward in that direction.
Great. Capricorn. Yeah, Saturn is so important in your chart.
Oh yeah, it's taken me a whole lifetime. Are you kidding? Saturn in Pisces, first of all, dealing with how long is it going to take? I can remember being in my 20s and my 30s thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to understand this Pisces. Like, how am I ever going to like be a container for this stuff?
Right.
And
it just keeps going and going and going, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Pisces. Yeah. And that's, you know, keeping in mind, you know, Saturn is time, and it can be so frustrating with space, the space and time we live in. But when it's relative to, you know, God knows how many thousands of lifetimes and 10,000 years of evolution, it, you know, this is just, you'll look back and say, wow, what was all that big deal about?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean,
and you got to have a sense of humor there, Jupiter and Gemini.
Yeah. Yeah. Carolyn Casey said to me, thank God for that Jupiter and Gemini. She's like, it's saving your life.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh boy. Anyway, you know, with Neptune in my 10th now too, it's like, okay, I mean, you just become Neptune. You got to take it easy about things.
Go with the flow.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any questions for Wendy? Okay, I think we're going to be good, Wendy. Thanks so much. And I hope you
You're
feel
welcome.
better. Thanks so much for showing up.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. Take care. Okay, moving on to Nyx. So here is, excuse me one second, I gotta move you guys. So here is her chart. And the first thing to notice, and this is big in evolutionary astrology, is that her moon is squaring her nodes, okay? Very tight, fairly tightly, 17 degrees 90-degree square to her south node in Sagittarius and north node in Gemini. And so in evolutionary astrology, any planet squaring the nodal axis, this lifetime, there's a lot of evolutionary pressure to integrate the south node with the north node through the archetype of in her case, the moon in Pisces in the 6th house. So her moon in Pisces in the 6th house is very important in this chart too. So for her to, when she experienced Uranus transiting over her moon, we'll hear from Nyx, her experience, but just keep in mind that it is also liberating her south node, north node axis into a higher functioning level, into a higher frequency level, okay? In evolutionary astrology, the nodal axis, when the moon is squaring it, is we spend a lifetime playing out the south node, and developing the ego identity with the south node archetypes. For her, it's around Sagittarius. It's also similarly to around the mind and consciousness and awareness, and the dialectic between the left brain, which is her north node, Gemini, within the 3rd house, the left brain analytical side of the mind that memorizes things, that picks things apart, kind of like the scientific mind that analyzes and uses logic to understand the world that we live in. But then we have the Sagittarian mind, which is the intuitive mind and the instinctive mind and the mind that's tuned to natural law. And so when a planet is squaring it, spending one, lifetimes or whatever, however many, really developing the Sagittarian archetype, and then other lifetimes developing the Mercurial Gemini archetype. And this lifetime is about integrating those two through her moon in Pisces in the 6th house. And so the other thing too is her moon is trining Saturn. This is a very nice trine here. In Scorpio in the 2nd house. So the one thing I want to mention, first of all, let me go back and do this here. Yeah, to the square. Her moon, this is a lot of mutable energy. Both Wendy and Nyx had a lot of mutable energy in their chart, which is the ability to change, immutable, to move in between, to move between forms, to assimilate information, and to learn in the mutability aspect modality is around learning, absorbing information. Her moon, which is personal, subjective, in her emotional body in Pisces, which is impersonal, collective, but it's in the 6th. And so Pisces, so the moon is yin, Pisces is yin, and 6th house is yin. So this is very internal. But it's kind of like, it could be internally reaching to the collective unconscious, if you will. Might be one way, I don't know, we'll see her story in a minute. But I just really want to point out the mutability of this, the changeability, constantly changing, evolving, and then the yin aspect of it, very strong yin. So moving along here, and oh, the last thing I did want to mention too, she also has a yod. Now, honestly, it's not that usual to see yods in charts. So I just have to point it out. Her yod, her Chiron is at the apex, which is healing the physical body, Taurus, okay? And then the moon in the 6th house is around health and wellness and integrating the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical bodies. That's where we're really, in a very yin internal way, integrating all these aspects of our body and recognizing the body as a sacred container that holds and needs to, spending time sort of purifying, detoxifying in order to integrate the various layers of the body in a very internal kind of way. So Chiron in Taurus, sort of just complements the whole physical healing part of it. And then it's the Pluto-Neptune now are sextile each other. Now that's almost everybody has Pluto-Neptune sextile. So that the sextile is not unusual. What is unusual is that Chiron is right between here, creating the yod dynamic. So again, the important part here is really Chiron. And I would suspect, because it is Pluto and Neptune, her relationship with the divine Neptune and her soul, integrating soul, spiritual through the physical body. So, but let's see what she has to say in 1 minute. So Uranus, again, using a 5-degree orb for Nyx, was from March 2006 to December 2009. Here's her Uranus. This is when it started. So she had Mercury conjuncted, but as we know, Mercury moves pretty fast. But to have Mercury conjunct Uranus when you're launching your Uranus cycle is pretty intense. It's like bringing really high frequency energy through the mind. She says that everything started out great. She was beginning her career as a massage therapist, but soon began to have serious health issues, 6th house, and again, Chiron in Taurus. Cyclic vomiting syndrome, exasperated by an inflamed gallbladder. It was removed during this time, although the surgery wasn't the solution. Lots of emotional turmoil with her mother. Felt emotional but disconnected, which is very, see, you know, Uranus, high frequency, can feel, and that's the fragmentation, is mental fragmentation, feeling mentally disconnected. And then just to mention here, we can, and if you want to talk about this next, your father, so her grandmother passed at the very end of this, just before the December 2009 ending here, August 22nd, 2009. Which was very, really touched her deeply, and which she'll talk about. And then her father showing up absolutely out of nowhere just after that in December 2009. She says, it's like something literally snapped in my head. That's so Uranian. So Nyx, I'll let you take it over from here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting part about all of this is that I had started massage therapy school in February of 2006. So that whole during that time, yeah, especially like March, the massage therapy school I was going to was teaching a lot of mind, body, spirit. A lot of alternative type of like Ashiatsu and polarity therapy, and as well as like learning a lot about the chakras and a lot of the Eastern medicine type of stuff, which I was really interested in. I was trying to figure out a way, because I had found my love for astrology, to kind of incorporate massage therapy in with that. So that's why I'd gone in there. Anyway, and I just thought that was kind of a nice little add with the Uranus and Mercury, of hitting that, kind of coming out of the floodgate like that. It was during that whole time, I would say like towards the end, really, in 2009 was 2009 was yeah, that was a shitty year, like, pardon my French, but like it was good, but then it towards the summer, and then at the end of it, it was almost like I was taking care of my grandma and not realizing that she was going to she was going to pass so sudden from she passed from 11 days after diagnosis of lung cancer. So and she was a tough woman. So this was like her 4th diagnosis of different cancers throughout like 30-40 years. So we just didn't realize it was going to happen that quick, but it was a good thing, because she was in so much pain. So my mom likes to say that we put her to sleep, because we basically had in some way that freedom to be able to do that. And that really tore my world apart. Yeah, something did snap in my head, and I was like, a part of me died. Like I lost a part of my soul, because I had a really close relationship with her. She'd helped my mother raise me. And so I had this different close relationship with her than I did with my mom. My mom wasn't really not the emotional type, really. We're a very Aquarius type of family. My mom's an Aquarius rising. My grandma's an Aquarius rising. and of course with me kind of having that unaspected like Uranus, and it's conjuncting my sun, very wide, like 9-degree orb, very, yeah, like Aquarius and Uranian energy really kind of ring strong. So it just it did a lot of upsetting disruption financially, and emotionally. I think I just got lost into my own selfishness and not realizing my mom was mourning her mother. So I was just more about like, I'd lost my cheerleader, I'd lost my rock, I'd lost one that kept me accountable and kept me in line. It was almost like my it was a very interesting period of I guess flirting with my shadow before really having it reign its ugly head during like after that, like my Saturn return was a doozy, just put it that way. It was I kind of just, I was going to, after my grandma had died, I was in the middle of like trying to go back to school to get my psych degree. I held on like barely for a year, and I just had the case of the, like, I got lost in a bottle. I got lost in a bottle, and that drinking bug really reared its ugly head. I'd had bouts of it in the past, but it really took over. And a lot of really stupid, reckless, I guess it's more of like this sex, drugs, rock and roll, but not really rock and roll, more of like turmoil. But in a way, it was very, all I could do was go into the pagan philosophy and spiritual path that I resonated with since I was a teenager. So I just kind of dived deep and just really started to study my chart. I dealt with the cyclic vomiting syndrome. I'd been dealing with it since I was 14. It seemed to have been seasonal or maybe food wise, but anytime I got emotionally upset with my mom, yeah, it triggered, and it was very unpredictable. Very unpredictable. I didn't know how long it would last. It could be days, it could be hours. It had been a very big hindrance on me really progressing into like that productive, independent adult, that your parent always wants you to like strive as. That had kind of been like my Achilles heel, my wound, I guess, really. And the weird part is that in February of 2016, it abruptly ended. I haven't had a spell for like over 4 years, which is fabulous, but it's almost like now it's shot me down with well, I guess I should say heightened a lot of my spiritual gifts. I'm very much have been an intuitive empath, a highly sensitive person. I like to call it a high sense of perception over like having kind of the stigma of the negativity of what it is. And I think for my grandma having to pass, I had that was the only way to happen for me to really start trusting that intuition. Me having this wisdom that just I know just coming out. I've always loved learning. If I could get paid to be a perpetual student, like I absolutely, like I love to learn. I use it as an escape tool. I use it as like something that I love to have fun with. But so I've found that this whole integration with the Saturn and the Gemini and the moon, I really think I've done that. And I think during that time was that time I did that, because I was going massage therapy school. It was the whole mind, body, spirit, and really understanding that you had to practice what you preached.
Mhm. Yeah.
You had to take, and as a massage therapist, you had to take care of yourself. And I was so diligent about like my food and things like that, that I was trying to figure it out. I could have driven myself crazy if I really wanted to try and figure out what triggered it.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I had to just stop, you know.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, I know that.
it was very interesting. And after that, the end of it was 2 days after, 2 days before my birthday. My dad out of nowhere found me on Facebook. And he's a Scorpio rising with, he has a Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury, Aquarius stellium. So yeah, and he has a Pisces moon, moon in Pisces.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and of course that's in his 5th house. So I thought that was kind of an interesting transit that both of him and I had been sharing, but just, you know, him in the 5th and mine in the 6th. So I thought that was really interesting. I kind of thought that my grandma sent him,
Oh
because
yeah.
for one to enter, I
Mhm.
guess. But it was
Yeah.
very, both my grandparents died within this whole period of time.
Right.
It's like that
And then your father showed up at the very end of it.
patriarchal kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Saturn in Scorpio, the death of the father, the death of the patriarchy, if you will. Anyway, and one thing to point out too, the Mars being, you know, the Mars here, in your 1st house, very yang, in conjunct your moon. So whatever Uranus touches, it's going to certainly hit your Mars too.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that, because I would figure, because the high octave of Neptune. So yeah, I'm not surprised it kind of plays together. It almost seems like my chart is dyslexic, though. It's completely all backwards and everything. So I feel like in this life I need to really integrate the polarity.
Yes, absolutely. In your body, in the physical body, it's no surprise you've gone on the path of healing the physical body, and then keeping in mind you got the Pluto sextile Neptune, deeply connected to Chiron in the physical body. So there could be some real healing around, you know, the trauma, Pluto and Scorpio in the, you know, trauma in the body, and then the spiritual sort of Neptune and Sagittarius, the ability to kind of dissociate into la la land and everything's wonderful up there, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah. So Chiron and Taurus is like, okay, now let's bring them together. Let's bring your enthusiasm, your what inspires you, Neptune in Sagittarius in the 4th, what emotionally inspires you. And do the healing work here, Pluto and Scorpio. Go deep into the body, into the pain that's held in the body here.
Yeah, and I go into work that is very cathartic, because it's I do it more for me, not for you kind of thing, but it is a help me help you thing, because most of the time just knowing that I can, you know, any kind of advice, anything, just like, you know, even like giving someone a smile, you know, is good enough, you know, and can, you know, make my day just as much as, you know, hopefully that it would make theirs. Yeah. And I found it very interesting, because I've been so aware, but I've been so unaware as a person, because I've been diving more deep, like into figuring out that I do channel, but I consciously channel. I just get really in tune to people, to where I could psychoanalyze someone, you know, after 5 minutes of talking to them, but I don't really want to do that, because I might creep them out, you know. So I'm at this point in my life trying to get comfortable with really who I am, because I've had to break down all the shame and all the the stuff that I've been told I can't feel that way when my feelings are valid. So a lot of shame resilience and such the last couple of years have been, I went into treatment and then got out of that, had some legalities and had successfully terminated those. So yeah,
Good.
I'm
Excuse me,
get my butt,
Christina,
my stuff together.
we will need to be
Yeah.
we will need to wind down very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. I know you got another presentation. So Nix, is there anything else just real quickly you want to summarize?
I just think it's very interesting on how the family chart patterns really flow very well with the story.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, I failed to mention is that your Pluto was, when Uranus was conjuncting your moon, Pluto had just started in your 4th house, it was right at your nadir here. And when it was done, when Uranus was done, it was up in here, Pluto was done with your Neptune and Sag. So yeah, I can imagine it was a very, very intense, emotionally intense time, real rotor-rootering.
Yeah, definitely. Rose-colored glasses definitely got taken off.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's what we're all here for. Anyway, thanks so much, Nix. I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions before we close down here?
Yes, I have a quick question.
Yes, Linda.
I noticed in Wendy's chart, her moon was trine her natal Uranus, and that Nix, Nix has a square.
Nix.
And so,
oh, that's interesting. I hadn't picked up on that. That's good.
Maybe Wendy's transit would be slightly easier. I don't know, and Nix is a little bit more difficult, perhaps.
So is this here? Let's go. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So you were saying that Wendy had a. Let me get her chart. I'm almost there here.
Mine is a separating trine, right? Because Uranus is 13 and the moon is 24, but it is
13,
trining my 4th house, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was also thinking for Nix with that 6th house, right? Her North Node in Gemini. Sorry, or maybe one of the answer, Linda.
Yeah, so Linda, you were saying that because her moon was trining her Uranus and Nix's moon was squaring her Uranus, that would give a qualitative difference.
Yes, and they're both separating, which would make it easier to. So you would refer the transit to the natal aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I was thinking with Nix's chart too, that with her Mercury in the 4th house in Capricorn and the North Node in Gemini, that's the ruler of her North Node, and her moon in the 6th, squaring the nodes, like she's learning to be her own mother and on a lot of levels, and be the mother for the collective, right? Pisces. And using discernment, right, to navigate all that Sag. It's a lot of Sag in Gemini, right? It's the nervous system, and and Mercury in the 4th in Capricorn is like, what structure can we put around the nervous system, or how can we, decondition the nervous system so that she can be a voice for the mother in the 4th house. Like there's a lot of mother potentiality here. I feel like a voice, because that's the ruler of her North Node in the 9th house. So she's a teacher, and I mean, meaning like once you can work with your nervous system, if you got a lot of work done on your nervous system, come down into your body more, because that 6th house Virgo is asking you that. That will help a lot.
Yeah, I think like she was saying, practicing what she teaches, that is so critical for her. The physical integration at all levels, as she works towards being a teacher as a container. Mercury is the ruler of the North Node.
Right. And I was thinking about when you asked me about the moon and my Jupiter, Mercury, and I said writing, but really the other piece is that it was learning how to come out of all the Virgo. Because my South Node's in the sixth, I have 3 planets in Virgo, Pluto in Virgo. It's like how to come out of the narrow criticism and all of that. The what's the word for it? And masochism, coming out of masochism and coming into the love of spirit, right? Coming into Neptune more.
And and it sounds like you've really come a long way with that. I'm sorry, somebody said something.
Yeah, it's next. It's what I've learned about with the whole Neptune Virgo. And getting rid of Virgo. It's really about progress, not perfection. Because being a Virgo rising, that's what really gets me stuck a lot of the time, is me being such a perfectionist. But then all my Sag is like, it's good enough. So, but I thought that was very interesting on what Wendy had said. I had not realized that on, but yeah, staying grounded is one of my big things.
Well, the drug, the drugs are a pathway, the alcohol and drugs are a pathway to spirit, right? Because we're actually trying to reach for Neptune, but we're going too far, right? We go way far out and then we can't contain it. And then we're in the shadow of Neptune. The high Neptune is more vertical. I mean, it's both, but it's a journey. And anybody that's trying to integrate a lot of mutability, I mean, it's a lifetime process. I mean, we actually have a lot of similar stuff happening.
You do, yeah.
Thank you,
guys, I think,
Linda.
thank you guys. Thanks, Nix and Wendy. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and everybody who showed up here. I am always open to questions. Thank you, David. I'm always open to questions. If anybody wants to pose questions on the EA Zoom Facebook page, I will be watching for them. And may everyone feel deeply nourished emotionally for the rest of their lives. I think that's part of the liberation, the Uranus moon liberation is learning to own our own emotional fulfillment. And as I said earlier, rejuvenation. Yeah, you're welcome, David.
Yeah, waking up that DNA, right, Christina?
That's right.
Getting the spiral going, because that just throws off a lot of stuff that we don't have to carry.
Yeah, waking up the DNA. Yeah, and I think we are all in process of that. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Love you.
Thank you, Christina. Would you all please thank Christina Hardy, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.